we will be doing some, hands-on coding and a little bit theoretical also, going deep into React and JavaScript, and
Okay.
starting with your basic introduction. Okay, great. So can you precisely tell me like how many years of experience you have with React.js and Redux
Uh,
respectively?
4 year.
4 year with
Four.
both React.js and Redux.
Yes, yes.
Okay, great, great to know that. Okay, so can you tell me like what all the things like day-to-day daily activities you are doing in your project, like daily tasks you are assigned? So in the chat, I'm giving you a JavaScript question. So
Okay.
you have to open JS Fiddle and solve it. So the question basically tells that you have a given an array. Okay, and in that array there are couple of values. So the output I want is that the couple of values. So any number that is like 0 equal to 0, that should be placed at the end of that series, and other numbers will be as it is given. Means like 1 2 4 3. The they are not doing sorting. If you see, it is not like 1 2 3 4 5. It is like 1 2 4 3 5, and then all zeros are at the end of that string. So you have to do that. Uh, I guess we can move ahead with other questions. Okay, so coming to React.js. Okay, so um, like what can you tell me what is the difference between use reducer and Redux?
So use reducer just like handle the reducer part of the things that we have in our Redux. So like in Redux we have action, reducer, restore, this all three components we
Correct.
have. But in it just handle the reducer part of our use reducer where we write a logic to update a state immutable way.
Okay, okay, okay. So let's do one thing. We shall try to write a React.js basic question. Okay, so just close the JS fiddle and open code sandbox. Yeah, so basically what I want, so you will try to, write like create a input box, and in from that input box, whenever we type or something, okay, and we submit the button, so you should just let me explain the question and then we can move ahead
Okay. Okay.
with working on that. So we will be creating an input box, and then we will write something like Delhi, Nagpur or something. Okay,
Mm.
and we press enter. So it should show below that input box, and it should be in a array list. Okay, so what will happen, like when we write something in the input box, so after we submit, the input box should get clear. Okay, and that value should be at the bottom of the input box, like just like to do app. Do you get my question?
Yes, yes.
Okay, great. So please move forward. And one more thing is there. Please try to do the input box in a way that I can press enter key and button click submit button also. Both ways it should work.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. At the line number 23, could you explain why we are using data and data.map?
Mm, no, like you wanted like to add a multiple item, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
No,
so
no,
add,
that for that data.map is there, but for what data is there?
no, no,
Data
just
and data dot.
checking if there is, then this line will execute actually. So it's like extra checking I'm doing.
Okay.
So normally we did when we do write code. So
Mm-hmm.
normally uh, follow this approach. Otherwise, sometimes uh, page can broke if you don't do like this.
Okay.
So yeah, once again was so try by clicking. is also working.
Yeah. So can you tell me one more thing? So at line number 21, you have used button equals to type equals to submit.
Yeah. So if you are
So,
using,
mm,
yeah, so by defining this way, so it will work like it. I mean, we can we can achieve both things. Like it will work for click as well as on as well as enter. Like if you don't want to click, then enter will also work. So if you define this type, then it will work. But it should be attached in the form. Uh, it should be wrapped with form, and it should have on submit method. Then only it will work.
okay, okay, no worries. Okay, moving to some again. You can stop sharing. No issue with that. We are done with the coding part.
Okay.
So could you tell me, like, we are using virtual DOM in React.js, right?
Yes.
So why we are using that?
So virtual DOM basically it is a representation of our real DOM in the memory, and whenever the changes occur, so virtual DOM basically it basically calculates the DOM representation of the current one with the previous one, and once it finds all the differences, once its calculations done, it will update only those changes that have actually changed in our real DOM. So that's why virtual DOM use. I mean, this is what like virtual DOM.
Okay. And could you tell me, like, what is the difference between controlled and uncontrolled component?
Like the control component which I have just wrote, right? Like in the coding part. So like that is what control component where the state of that input element is controlled by of, our component. Okay, so we will able to control the state of input with the component. So that is like what control component, and uncontrolled component is like it's more like a traditional HTML way to control the state. Like it's maintain its own internal state of that uncontrolled component. And to achieve this, like we use ref here if we want to do if we want to go with uncontrolled components. So their component is basically not managed by the component. I mean, the input element state is not going is not maintained by a component.
So can you tell me which components are handled by DOM? Like we can directly change components via a DOM affecting the DOM by passing that. So in that manner, which are the components which can be directly affected by DOM changes?
Like that is, I think, uncontrolled components.
Uh, can you tell me, like, what is synthetic event?
So synthetic event is basically the event which basically work across all browser. Like we have a Chrome, Firefox. So like their behavior will be the same across
Mm,
all browser. Like some of the browser native event we have like the stop propagation and prevent default.
okay. And can you tell me, like, what event loop works? Like how event loop works
So
in JavaScript?
event loop is the responsible for like maintaining the asynchronous operation in JavaScript. So basically, event loop maintains some data structure behind the scene. So it's maintain one call stack and one queue. So call stack basically is responsible for like executing the task, and once the task is finished, it will basically opt out from the state stack, Then we will have a queue. Basically, a queue is responsible for maintaining the queue of operation, and it is, and one by one, it's basically uh, sending the queue to the that call stack. And whenever like a stack find any asynchronous operation, like for example, set timeout, so it's basically going to put into a different stack here, like browser API. So so browser API here basically gave us a lesson like it acts as a separate thread in JavaScript. So it's basically so event loop basically has led this asynchronous this stuff, and it keeps checking the call stack whether it's empty or not. So if, uh, if it's empty, then the like the asynchronous operation will get execute. So until all synchronous operations get finished, then asynchronous operation will will going to execute at the end. So this entire operation has led by the event loop actually.
Okay. Can you tell me like how can we write a prototype for promise? Can you tell me like what is the use of bind in class component in React?
Yeah. So actually, class component bind is used because in order to have the correct context of the function. So that way bind is used in the class-based component to have the correct context of the function that we have in our render part. So we bind in the constructor. So yes, that for that purpose
I-
it used.
Is there any other thing? Can you tell me like there is much more use of bind
Yeah.
like
So bind. Yeah. This is the one case I told you. There is one more like bind also basically is used to invoke the uh, function. So it's return a bound function, and it's return a kind of bound function, and inside that function we can use that function to invoke the function basically, and we can pass a number of arguments.
can you tell me how we can implement use memo?
Yes. So use memo like basically if there is some uh, complex computation is going around in our application, we basically memorize that value. Uh, I can explain with coding part actually if you want. Uh, like
Yeah, sure.
I will write it here only. So suppose we have like one function here, uh, expensive calculation, and uh, doing some this long expensive calculations here. And here we have one number as well. So, uh, so suppose this function is used some in this application. So here we can use here like use memo, and we can call this function. and we pass some value here. Like let's suppose I'm sending count here, and, and I'm launching this value as well. Problem with this actually long.
Okay, can you tell me like what all the things we do to increase the enhancement of performance in React.js application?
Yeah, so we do like lot of things like first performance we do code splitting. So in so instead of sending a big file in a in a in a browser, send a multiple chunks files with the help of lazy loading. So this is what called code splitting. So we use lazy method from React to do code splitting. So it decrease the load time of our app in the browser, and then we use this use memo use callback to achieve performance in the application. And we with use of arrow function, it's good to use arrow function in application, and avoid defining the inline function definition, and we can use fragment to avoid extra wrapper in the DOM, uh, and we can use throttling and debouncing as well where it's required. So we can implement that too as well. If there is a need in our application.
Okay. Can you tell me the difference between package.json and package.log.json? So can you tell me what is the difference between for each and map? Can you tell me like if uh, we are using HTML, so what are semantic tags in that?
So semantic tags like in HTML, like we have a form tag, like form, form, table, table, form, table. So these are the semantic tags basically,
Mhm.
which defines the meaning of the tag actually. So what the things will be there inside those tags. So those are just like
Okay.
semantic tags.
So there is much more reason behind it. Can you tell me that reasons uh, behind creating semantic tags in HTML? Okay. What is the difference between inline and block elements?
So block element basically, if we use a block, so block element basically occupy the whole line, even if we have the hot uh, sentence. So it's going to block like entire line over here, and in inline basically it's going to require up to that. space. So
Can you
yeah.
tell me positions in CSS?
So positions we have like statics, relative, absolute, sticky, uh, fixed. We have
Correct. We have five positions. Can you explain me all?
so static is like by default, like whenever our page is rendered into DOM, so it's a by default position. We don't have to define it. So it will be by default a static. Relative is like the element basically move. Uh, the element will basically move with respect to the parent here. Parent in the sense like it will have it once we define the positions like the relative, it will have it will expose other properties, other styling properties like top left, top left, bottom right. So we can make it use of this styling property. So it will relatively move uh, uh, with respect to the parent. And we have an absolute, so in absolute we will have parent and child element. So if you have defined a child element absolute and parent is relative, then it's going to the child element basically it will position relatively with respect to the parent. So it also have an we can also use their uh, top, left, right, bottom property we can use with this in absolute. And we have a sticky after fixed scrolling position, the element get stick to the uh, DOM. Uh,
Okay.
I mean, you can scroll, but it won't move actually.
It will
And we
stick to the viewport of the page.
yeah
Yeah.
yeah and fixed basically suppose you are implementing an header. So uh, and if you scroll down, then header will be then header will not going to move along with the scrolling position. But in sticky we define a offset actually. So some particular offset, once it reach that offset, then element will get sticky. But in case of
Okay.
fixed, it will be fixed from like the moment you scroll down, the like
Hmm.
if you make the header fixed, so it will be fixed the moment you start scrolling.
So my question with a Redux is, can you tell me like the flow of Redux, how it works?
So Redux basically mainly work on uh, three principles like action, store, and reducer. So action basically describe like what is happening. So it's contain action type and some additional information like payload. So whatever the action we write, the reducer will listen each action, uh, and based on each action we defined a logic to update the state in the reducer. And so reducer basically overall contain the logic to update the state. And then once we have got the state, so it will subscribe to store, and then store will inform the component that we got updated state, and we and it's need to re-render. And between action and reducer, there is also called middleware also there if you're dealing with the asynchronous operation. So that also it's also there. There is a one part between action and reducer.
Have you
So
worked with Redux, Thunk, or Saga?
yes, both actually I have worked, Thunk and Saga.
Okay. Can you tell me the difference between syntax of pseudo classes and pseudo elements?
Okay.
Like why do first tell me why do we use pseudo classes and pseudo elements? Then we'll go ahead with that.
It's basically define the state of element